Dr. W talks. What are ethics and morality? Both ethics and morality are the study of good and bad, right and wrong. These terms relate to how people make some of the most difficult decisions in life, and also the frameworks and institutions that we set up to let society function. But isn't it obvious what's right and wrong? How do people make difficult decisions about these things? And is there a difference between ethics and morality? If you've never stopped to think about the study of right and wrong before, it may surprise you to know that there is a large range of opinions about how we should make moral and ethical decisions. When you think about it, there are many issues in life that are highly contentious, and many different opinions about what makes right and wrong. As for ethics and morality, even their definitions are controversial. Ethikos was an ancient Greek word, which developed from their word ethos, meaning custom. Moralist was coined by a Roman thinker Cicero as a Latin translation of ethikos. So the words started off with exactly the same meaning, and they are still often used interchangeably today. If I talk about the ethics or morality of the situation, or the ethical or moral issues arising from something, I probably mean the same thing. What could be seen as right or wrong here, and how and why might people disagree with each other about this? However, there are some differences in the way these words are used today, although again people don't quite agree about what these differences are. Morality is more likely to be used to refer to an individual sense of right and wrong, perhaps driven by religious convictions or upbringing, whereas ethics is more likely to refer to public morality, the ethics of cloning or business ethics, for example, and is not always seen to place such a large emphasis on personal judgment. However, most people who discuss ethics and morality don't worry too much about which term they are using at any given time. Categories of ethics and morality. There are many factors that influence a person's decision-making process, including family and friends, cultural and religious practice, motivation, personality, and individual context. Likewise, we all sometimes do things that we would see as wrong, even if we don't admit it. Just because we do something wrong doesn't mean we accept that it is right. But it's what drives us to think that something is right or wrong that we'll consider here. We'll look at 3 different ways of categorizing moral and ethical viewpoints, and discuss each in turn. First, we can describe viewpoints as absolute or relative. In absolute morality, the same things are always right or always wrong, regardless of the circumstances. An example of this kind of viewpoint could be historical lists, such as the 10 Commandments. The commandment says do not steal, so, according to absolute morality, the commandment is absolute. Stealing is always wrong. We could see the Islamic categories of halal and haram as another example here. Something that is haram is forbidden, it is always wrong. Something that is halal is acceptable. A different view is relative morality. This view suggests that right and wrong can vary depending on the context or situation. For example, a follower of relative morality may say that stealing is normally wrong, but in a situation where someone has hungry children to feed and no other way of providing for them, it would cease to be a wrong action. In this view, we have to look at the relative rights and wrongs in the situation. Stealing could be acceptable. The term moral relativism is also used to describe systems in which people say there is no fixed right or wrong. It's all about different cultures and their interpretations. Now let's look at a second framework, this time with 3 different viewpoints. These are seen as the main categorizations for ethical viewpoints today. On one side, we have deontological ethical systems. This means duty-based or rule-based ideas. These systems suggest that there are some basic principles or rules that we should base all of our morality on, and if we follow these rules, we will know we're doing right rather than wrong. Today, most absolute ethical systems can be seen as deontological, because they're based on a series of fixed rules. Immanuel Kant's famous categorical imperatives summarize 3 rules for life like this. Would it always be right in every situation? Does it uphold the dignity and sanctity of human life? Would it help make the world a better place? According to Kant, by ensuring we follow each of these 3 rules, we can make sure that we always do the right thing. In contrast to this is consequentialist ethics. This often relates to the relative morality we saw before. Rather than basing ideas of right and wrong on a series of rules, this allows the situation to influence the view of right or wrong, as this asks instead what the outcomes will be. According to these theories, the action that will produce the best overall outcome or consequence is the action that is morally right, regardless of what it actually involves. The utilitarian theories proposed by Jeremy Bentham are a classic example of consequentialist ethics. He said that an action can be defined as right if it will produce the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. The morality is derived from what will be produced by the action, the consequence, rather than the action itself. However, some utilitarians would argue that theirs is an absolute rather than a relative viewpoint, as the formula of what will produce the greatest good for the greatest number will provide an absolute answer. Again, we can see these categories becoming more complicated. There is another alternative here which is not based on rules or consequences, but on specific virtues or good things to aim at in life. According to virtue ethics, an action is right if it is based on an idea of goodness or virtue. Greek philosopher Aristotle and Chinese thinker Confucius both encouraged this approach to doing the right thing. Living a moral life is about nurturing and cultivating goodness in yourself. The system of situation ethics, where people make moral decisions based on what is the most loving thing to do, is based on both consequentialism and virtue ethics, with love as the supreme virtue. Here is a third and final model, for now, for looking at moral and ethical ideas. Are they religious or non-religious? Ultimately, do they derive from an idea of divine power and divine command as the ultimate understanding of morality, or do they see themselves as originating in the human struggle to establish a moral framework? These two categories are sometimes seen as opposed, but they often result in similar outlooks on life. A committed religious thinker may end up with a deontological, consequentialist, or virtue-based view of right and wrong, depending on their and their community's interpretation of their religious framework. In summary, the study of morality and ethics is an important field that touches on many aspects of human decision-making, from making and following laws, to healthcare, to the environment and personal everyday lifestyle decisions. Next time you are making a moral decision, why not stop and think for a moment to reflect on your own viewpoint?